You know this face. Those wide, searching eyes. That impossible lightness, as if the world could never quite touch her. For 70 years we have called Audrey Hepburn effortless. But the truth is almost the opposite. The grace the world adored was carved out of hunger, fear, and a childhood spent under the shadow of war. This is the story of how a shy, half-starved girl from war-torn Europe became the most beloved face in Hollywood. Told in 5 moments, that changed everything. She was born Audrey Kathleen Ruston in Brussels in the spring of 1929. Her mother was a Dutch baroness, her father an English businessman with a cold heart and a wandering eye. On paper, it was a life of privilege. In truth, it was already quietly coming apart. When Audrey was just 6 years old, her father walked out of the house and never truly came back. She would later call it the most traumatic moment of her entire life. A wound, she said, that never fully healed. And it was only the beginning of what the world was about to take from her. 1940. The war came for everything. As war crept across Europe, her mother believed the Netherlands would stay neutral and safe and move the family to the Dutch city of Arnhem. It was a terrible miscalculation. In 1940, the Nazis invaded, and Audrey, barely 11 years old, was trapped inside an occupation that would nearly kill her. She learned to disappear. She stopped using her English-sounding name because English names were dangerous now. She watched neighbors and family friends taken away, never to return. Her own uncle was executed in front of the community. And still, quietly, she found a way to fight back. Audrey had trained as a ballerina, and she turned that training into a weapon. She danced in secret performances to raise money for the Dutch resistance. Performances so hidden that when they ended, no one in the room dared to applaud. A silent child, dancing in silence for a cause that could have gotten her killed. Then came the winter of 1944. History remembers it as the Hunger Winter. Food simply ran out across the occupied Netherlands. Audrey and her family survived on flour ground from tulip bulbs and water to fill an empty stomach. She developed anemia and swelling and a lifelong fragility she would carry to the very end. At the peak of the famine, much of the occupied Dutch population survived on as little as 500 calories a day, barely a quarter of what the human body needs. When the war finally ended, a 15-year-old Audrey weighed almost nothing at all. Relief workers arrived with food and medicine from an organization that would one day be called UNICEF. She never forgot it. Decades later, that single act of kindness would come to define the final chapter of her life. She poured herself back into ballet, chasing the only dream she had left. She moved to London. She trained relentlessly on legs that had nearly starved. And then came the verdict that quietly broke her heart. Her instructors told her the truth. The war had cost her too much. She had started too late and stood too tall to ever become a prima ballerina. And then everything changed. It should have been the end of the story. Instead, it became the pivot that made her a legend. Needing money, Audrey took small parts in films and on the London stage. And there, almost by accident, the camera found something that the entire ballet world had somehow missed. While performing in a play, she was chosen for the lead in a Hollywood film called Roman Holiday, a sheltered princess who runs away to taste one ordinary day of freedom. The role could have been written for her. The studio watched her screen test just once and knew they had found something rare. Her leading man was Gregory Peck, one of the biggest stars in the world. He was so certain this unknown girl would become a sensation that he demanded the studio print her name above the title, equal in size to his own. He was right. The film premiered in 1953. Audiences had never seen anyone quite like her. Not a bombshell, not a starlet, but something entirely new. Fragile and radiant and impossibly alive. Almost overnight, the malnourished girl from occupied Holland became the most talked about face in the world. In just over a decade, her life had carried her from Brussels to occupied Arnhem to the ballet studios of London and at last to Hollywood. That year, she won the Academy Award for Best Actress for her very first major film role. She was just 24 years old. The little girl who once danced in silence had become Hollywood royalty. But the hunger she still carried inside her, the fear and the longing to be loved, would shape everything that came next. For that single performance, she was nominated for an Academy Award and won. It was the first of 5 nominations across her career, but this one, her very first, she would treasure most. Because behind the glamour, behind the little black dress and the effortless smile the whole world would try to copy, Audrey Hepburn was still searching for the one thing the war had stolen from her. And whether she ever truly found it is the rest of this story. The golden years. In 1954, the same year she won her Oscar, Audrey married the actor Mel Ferrer. For a woman who had lost her father so young, it felt at last like the family she had always wanted. The films came one after another. Funny Face, War and Peace. She had become, almost overnight, the most elegant woman in the world, the face every designer and photographer longed to capture. Around this time, she met a young French designer named Hubert de Givenchy. Their friendship and their partnership would last the rest of her life, and together they would make her the most imitated woman in the world. Givenchy would dress her, on screen and off, for nearly 40 years. She played opposite the greatest leading men of the age: Humphrey Bogart in Sabrina, Gary Cooper in Love in the Afternoon, Fred Astaire in Funny Face. With every film, the legend only grew. In just over a decade, she had made some of the most beloved films ever put to screen. But what she wanted most was not another role. It was a child of her own. And that quiet dream had been breaking her heart for years through miscarriage after miscarriage. Then, in 1960, her son Sean was born. She would call motherhood the role she had been born to play, the one thing she treasured far above any film. In 1961, she slipped into a simple black dress and became Holly Golightly in Breakfast at Tiffany's. It is the image the world still remembers first. And yet, she never believed any of it. She called herself insecure and ordinary, convinced she was not truly beautiful. The most admired face in the world could not see what everyone else did. For all her doubts, she understood something most people spend a lifetime chasing. But fame exacted a quiet price. Behind the perfect image was a woman who longed, more than anything, simply to be loved, and who never quite felt that she was. She once said it plainly. In 1964, she starred in My Fair Lady, one of the biggest films of the decade. She stood at the very summit of Hollywood, but the summit, she was learning, could be a lonely place. In the end, she would win an Academy Award, a Tony, an Emmy, and a Grammy. One of only a small handful of artists ever to achieve all 4. A debt repaid. Her marriages did not last, and by the 1980s, she had stepped away from Hollywood almost entirely, choosing a quiet life in Switzerland with her sons. And then, in 1988, she remembered the relief workers who had fed her, a starving 15-year-old, in 1945. So she became a goodwill ambassador for UNICEF, the very organization that had once saved her life. In just 5 years, she made over 50 field missions to some of the most desperate places on earth: Ethiopia, Somalia, Bangladesh. The child who had once known hunger now held hungry children in her arms and begged the world to look. She lived by a line she loved to repeat: more than the films, more than the fashion, it is this that endures. The girl who once had so little and who gave so much, who showed the world that true elegance and simple kindness were always the very same thing. She liked to say that nothing was ever truly impossible. In 1992, she was diagnosed with a rare cancer and kept working for the children until she no longer could. On January 20th, 1993, Audrey Hepburn died at her home in Switzerland. She was just 63. The girl who danced in silence, who survived on tulip bulbs, had spent her final strength feeding the world's children. In the end, she had found the very thing the war stole from her, and she found it by giving it away. If her story stayed with you, consider subscribing. There are so many more lives from Hollywood's golden age still waiting to be told.